Now, this presentation is slides that I just pulled from every which way you can imagine. And so we're going to talk about them. I'm going to try to start at the top and talk to you about the sources of funds for city schools. And this chart is in the mayor's budget books for this fiscal year. The city fiscal year started the 1st of July, right? And so the 1st of July, that's what the school budget looked like, okay? 65% from where? The state. The state. The state sustains our schools. Got that? Then the next biggest contribution is the city government, 21%. And we're not going to talk about the fact that the city contributes 25% and higher to the police department and only 21% to our schools, but we're not going to talk about it. And then other funds, special funds, an enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is the food service. Apparently that's something within the school district that actually makes money, right? But every dime that it makes has to go back into the food service for our children, which is why, thankfully, our children get free breakfast and lunch, period. No questions asked. They just feed them. Next. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the three big sources, right? Federal, state, and local, right? So the federal funding comes in the form of legislation that's passed, right? So Title I says that the feds will provide funding to low-income students, right? So that's what Title I dollars are supposed to be spent on. Then there's Title II, which is for professional development of teachers, okay? So we get money from that. And then we get the special education funding for our children, okay? Now, as we saw on the previous slide, you can go back one second, okay? We're only getting from the feds the yellow, right? So that's not a whole lot of money in the big scheme of things, right? But our federal revenue is 2% of the whole pie. And then we get funds for English language learners, right? And I got a whole conversation about that, but I don't have time tonight to go into that because they call that ELL. I have a new term called HOL, historically oppressed learners, right? Now they give money for English language learners, but they just completely forgot about us historically oppressed learners. And we ought to be getting some extra money for that as well. But we'll figure out how to make noise around that later. Okay, so the policies that say the feds, right? This is the laws that our Congress people pass, right? So they passed an Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965, and they renew it every few years, right? So we're still operating under this 1965 law. Then the No Child Left Behind Act from 2001, right, which left all black and people of color behind, right? Then Every Student Succeeds Act, and this is our Republican contribution to the problem. Right? So these are laws, right, that have been passed at the federal level, right, to provide funding. But we're only getting, what? 2% of our money comes from the feds. Next slide. Okay. Now let's look at state funding. And I got more about feds, but let's shift to state. State funding centers around the most important date for us, September 30th, which is when the district sends a report to Annapolis saying how many children we have enrolled this school year. We at Liberty, my partner in crime over there, we spend a lot of time making sure our enrollment numbers are up for that report that he's got to send to North Avenue, right? It says, as of September 30th, we're at whatever, right? So how do we get involved in that? Because the important thing to know is that school funding is based on enrollment, right? At least from the perspective that 65% of the money comes from the state, right? So if the state isn't getting the information it needs, it's not gonna fund us, right? So we gotta ensure we keep getting that 65%, because the Fed portion is 2%, right? But the state portion, the biggest portion, is dependent on us having enrollment numbers, right, and keeping them up. And we'll talk a little bit about enrollment. And the student characteristics, meaning if they're English language learners, if they're disabled students, and so you also get state funding around that, okay? And then community wealth. In Maryland, okay, every jurisdiction in the state, including Baltimore City, is valued according to our property values, right? And so Baltimore is a low wealth district. We don't have $1 million properties, right? But you compare us to Montgomery County, and they got a lot of $1 million properties, right? So they are a jurisdiction with wealth. So compared to them, the state subsidizes our education system because we don't have a strong local tax base, right? We don't have high value property where people are paying big bucks on their property taxes, right? So somehow we gotta be equitable across the state of Maryland. You know, we're at the bottom of the list of counties next to Dorchester and, you know, the Eastern Shore poor. But the state gives us a wealth equity distribution of funds, and you'll see that a little bit later. Okay, next. Okay, so this is a chart from North Avenue, right, that they put in their budget presentations when they came around the city. So this basically shows last year and this year. And the total state revenue coming to us, look at that number, it dropped, right? It's less money than we got last year. That's a problem, right? So I'm throwing hints out here because there are opportunities for us to have conversations with our state legislators, right? First question I'd ask my state delegate or senator, how come we got less money this year? And you know what they're gonna say? Because the student enrollment fell. Okay, so we're getting foundational funding, we're getting a geographic cost of education index funding, right? So these are all the things the state is giving us money to cover. All right, this is an important slide to have, just to refer to when you have these conversations at your school with your legislators. See this TIF grant? Y'all know what that's about? Tax increment financing is what TIF stands for. Now, thanks to our mayor, former mayor, Stephanie Rawlins Blake, we gave a TIF to a developer down in the harbor. The TIF, which means that we're not collecting taxes from the developer. We gave him a break. So he's not paying any taxes, right? Which, because the property went up. Now his property value went from 0, right, to $1 billion almost, right? So the state sees that his property is now more valuable. But yet we're not collecting taxes. So the state is saying, oh, but y'all getting richer. At least some people are in this city, right? So that means they're gonna give us less state money. Got that? Less state money because the developer got richer. Now that's bad. That sucks. So we went and fought, and this is how much they're giving us to offset that. Right? Now, that's a property tax bill for the developer. Right? You and I own property, and we may be paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year in property tax. This nugget is $500,000 to offset the fact that they're not paying taxes. Think about that, right? Their property is worth so much that if they were paying taxes, they'd be paying that much. Okay? Next slide. Okay, so the important thing to get here is our legislators go to Annapolis for 90 days, right? Sometimes they do good things for us, and sometimes they don't. But they don't do anything unless we ask them, right? We got to demand things. So, you know, we said, you got to fix this TIF thing, right? So they did. We said, our buildings are the oldest in the state, our schools. We need capital building funding to take care of that. So they increased the funding that they're giving us to maintain the old buildings. They're also giving us money to buy new and build new buildings, right? They gave us money to offset the transportation stuff, right, for the kids, to get them back and forth to school. But none of this happens unless we are speaking up, right? We got to go and make them, right, put this kind of stuff in the budget. We got money for Judy Centers. In fact, we got $2 million more this year than we got last year. Judy Centers are the early learning sites for our kids, right? We're getting slots revenue, right? We're getting casino revenue. So all of these things that help offset our funds, right, get finalized in February. So I'm painting a timeline for you, right? So January, 90-day session in Annapolis. They let us know at the end of the session what goodies are coming our way, right? And that's usually in April, right? This enrollment thing is big. These slides are showing the decrease in enrollment, right? When I first came back home, it was 86, close to 86,000. They're projecting more losses. And that means that principal's budget is going to keep going down. Every child he loses, he's losing about $7,000 a child. They put together the enrollment task force, and if you haven't seen the enrollment task force reports, there are 3 reports from 3 different committees that they put together, and I can share that with anybody who wants them. Okay? I think this is the biggest takeaway. We ignored enrollment, but I was at a press conference with the mayor, and the new mayor was expressing her disappointment in our housing policies. Why? Because the housing voucher program gives vouchers to needy families, and they tell them to go to the county. So when she first came into office, almost a year and a half ago now, they had just lost 2,000 families from Baltimore City because we gave them vouchers and said, see ya. Right? 2,000 families left town. So when we look at enrollment, our government policies are adversely impacting enrollment. How crazy is that? Okay, next slide. So the recommendations out of this task force, enrollment task force, you know, continue to be three things. This is the union thing, Baltimore Teachers Union, going around. Collect more qualitative data on who's leaving and why. You know, I just gave you a great example when you lose 2,000 residents. Next slide. Okay, local. So now we're down to the city level. Okay, we talked about federal, state, now city. Okay, so the city funding contribution, the city contribution to our schools is 21%, right? So 21% of everything the district gets comes from the city. So we're looking at things like the city contributing via the bottle tax, which nobody likes, but that was the previous mayor's way of saying, well, I'm going to give more, so I'm going to tax you to give more to schools. And the casino revenue from the Horseshoe Casino. There's a percentage of that that comes to schools. And then grants, fundraisers, and other donations. Okay. So, on May the 8th, the school board voted to approve Dr. Santelisa's proposed budget. Okay, again, we're in May now, right? So, that amount that she thought she needed to run the schools is $1.15 billion. They also voted, based on this amount of money in the budget, that our neighborhood, they call them traditional, I call them neighborhood schools. We're going to get $5,521 per student. That's what they voted for. And for charter schools, it was going to be $9,017 per student. Okay. Got those two numbers? When we look at what the city spends, the 21% that it gives, okay, that comes out to be $371,000, right, for the coming school year, million. And it is an increase over last year from 360 and the year before, 321. But these are all the items, right? The maintenance of effort is a state mandate that the local jurisdiction has to give it to the school district. Now, there are some jurisdictions that give far more than the state mandates, but not Baltimore City. That is the minimum amount, that first line, that the city has to give to schools, all right? We can push the mayor and get her to increase the maintenance of effort, but we haven't organized around that, and we need to think about that. Okay, so she's paying for crossing guards, nurse program, insurance policy, she's paying, yeah, wow, $9 million this year. Debt service for bonds, school construction, she has to contribute to. So those are the things the mayor contributes to. Next slide. So the bottom line here, next slide, is that this is the budget, and they've decided at North Avenue to break it into two pieces. The part that goes to the schools and the part that they keep at North Avenue. So they say they're going to give, in September, $782 million to schools. And they're only going to keep 374. Now they claim that's an 82-18 split. comparing last year and this year, the amount of funds and where it comes from, state 849 million down, again, down from last year. City funding, we gotta do something about that, right? Federal, down. You got a congressman out there you can call and ask what's going on. Why are we getting less federal money, right? Other revenue, about the same. But this is a good chart to have. And I'll email anybody that wants. You can have the whole presentation. Go ahead. And again, I just pulled slides from different places. This is some special funds that the district gets to support Title I, Title II, things of that sort. Title I district initiatives, this is how we're using that 2% of the budget that we get from the feds. This is other revenue. As I said, the enterprise fund is the food service, right? Because that pays for itself. And then they have extra money. Next slide.
Is that federal? I heard the food service is federal.
It's an enterprise. It's a local enterprise fund. And it's just like our water and sewer bill. Every dime DPW charges us for water has to stay within that enterprise fund, right? So it has to be self-sustaining. So all the dollars that come in for water and sewage stay and be spent for water and sewage. The same for the food service. All the dollars that come in, whether it's federal dollars, state or city dollars, they have to stay within that enterprise and be spent only on the enterprise. And in this instance, it's food service. So this is a good chart just to look at how Dr. Santelises is spending money. See that number, 68. Some days they will tell you it's 80%, 80-20 split. Now up here it says 68. Only 68 is going to schools, which means she's keeping more, right? These slides are really strange.
Isn't that difference that 14% the school supports, but those are money that's kept at the central office but spent on schools, so the 68 plus the 14 equals the 82 that you referenced earlier?
You know, it's the new math. Yeah. Could be. I'm not going to speak for them. I'm only presenting the data and my understanding. Then this is how she spends what she keeps. Okay. The blueprint to me is the most impactful thing going on at North Avenue. Okay. But the investments that are going into the blueprint are going to make things the way they should be once those investments are made. So direct school allocations, we've got, money that's called the Fair Student Funding, we got locked, we got charter, we got unlocked, we got AOP, we got targeted, and that's where Joe comes in, because Joe's gonna explain all that stuff to you about the kinds of money he gets as the principal. Next slide. And again, this is comparison from last year to this year about the allocation that comes to schools. We have a hybrid of the Fair Student Funding formula in place this school year. And the hybrid is to get us to a transition where we start introducing weights for students. And the poorer the student, the more disabled students, right? And so we can talk about that at a later date. Charter formula, they have solidified that 2% can be charged by North Avenue for the services that charters get from North Avenue. So they're trying to recoup some of the money. And again, for 19, their per pupil formula amount is $9,000. Next slide. Yeah, this is all of the staff at North Avenue, and how much money they're getting in various departments. Lots of money.
Good evening, everyone. First off, I want to thank everybody because it is raining outside and school budgeting isn't the sexiest of topics, but there's still a ton of people in this room, and it's really inspiring to know that this many people care about the schools and are willing to come out on a Monday afternoon in the pouring rain to come and find out more information. So I hope this is a good use of your time today, and I can try to be as clear or transparent for you all, at least about our school budget at Liberty Elementary. So I'm the principal of Liberty. I've been there for, just finished my 8th year, so starting my 9th year. And I'm going to try to take you as best I can through how I go through and build the budget at my elementary school, along with our community members and our teachers, and all of the things that we kind of take into account when we're going through and building these budgets. I'm gonna just say first off, like, Ms. Trueheart is, that was a very, very thorough conversation just about a very, very complex topic. I'm gonna try and make this pretty simple and try to break it down as easy as possible. I will also tell you, like I will be the first to admit I don't always make perfect decisions because that's the nature of the work. There are very, very difficult choices that we're being faced with when we make these choices. I would love to, provide a foreign language teacher and have a music teacher, and just, based on what I see in the budget doesn't support those things. So we as a community have to make very tough choices, and that's kind of the nature of budgeting as it goes to school. So I can go through and explain the rationale for why these decisions are being made, and you may or may not like that rationale, and that's totally fine. But I think these are important conversations for you to have at your school-based budgeting forums with your principal and with your school family councils to voice your concerns and what you want in terms of how the budget is being built. So we'll go to the first slide. Okay, so point number one, there is never enough money because the needs are so great, okay? We have so many different needs in our schools, and I have so many desires in terms of what I want to be able to provide to our kids, and we just don't have enough money. We're talking about getting, doing a rallying for more funding through the Kerwin Commission, and I think even when we get those Kerwin dollars, it is going to be a huge blessing and a huge lift, but probably 4 or 5 years in, when it starts to regulate and you've been getting those funds for a couple years, people are going to look back and be like, gosh, I wish I had funds to do this, or I need to provide this for my kids that I'm not able to. So, when it comes down to it, the needs are so great, and there are never enough funds. So, even if we get these additional monies through Kerwin, there's still going to be tough choices to be made. I would say in each of your school budget forums, when you go and talk to your principal, you should be able to look at your school budget and be able to tell what the priorities are of your school. Same thing for any business or any organization. You should be able to look at a company's budget and see what they are prioritizing. Hopefully, when you look at our budget at Liberty, because I'm going to take you through line by line what we spend our money on, you'll be able to see what we have as a community elevated and prioritized for our community. That might not be the same thing for your community. Every group needs to decide what they want to elevate and what they want to prioritize. Even with the $3.3 million that is given to me each year to run the school, myself, Ms. Trueheart, Ms. Chongus, a bunch of other people, we got to hit the ground and we got to raise additional money. So each year, we're bringing in an additional about $800,000 in order to keep our program afloat. It's kind of a unique school because I've been there for 8 years, and there's something about stability. It's a pretty high-performing school, so people want to, put their money into winners. So that might not be a reality that exists for your school, but just know that we're having to hustle and hit the pavement in order to make work what we have by raising this additional money. Every little bit counts. At Liberty, we prioritize the following things. So, personalized learning. So you'll see investments into technology. You'll see heavy investment into special educators, intervention staff, and programs like Reading Partners, because I truly believe that our kids need a lot of one-on-one support or small group support. We need a lot of differentiated instruction, so personalized learning is one of our top priorities. Our second is social emotional learning, so we do a lot around field trips. We have a partnership with Holistic Life Foundation, so the kids get meditation and mindfulness practices every day, and we have a pretty elaborate after-school program. That's something that was really important for the parents and that contribute to the social emotional learning of our kids. So, you know, the kids get access to soccer and karate and arts after school and things like that. And then community involvement is another thing that we really prioritize. So we have partnerships with the Judy Center. That's where some of the additional fundraising goes to. We have a food pantry program. So a lot of that is done just through partnerships, and it's not an additional cost to the school, but in terms of dollars. But that is a cost for some of the people in this room in terms of time to make that all possible. So those are our priorities. Hopefully you see that in the budget document as we go through. Next slide. Okay. So when you get if you ask your principal for the composite report, which is the report that all the schools get that has all of their budgeting on there, it's really, really convoluted. It's like a 23-page report. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, so I go through and I break it down pretty simply for my families and for you all into this 3-page document, right? And it's categorized, so you can see how much money is being spent per category and how much money is being spent per staff member. In Baltimore City, we work off of what's called an average salary, right? So our custodians aren't making $57,000, okay? That $57,000 includes their benefits, it includes their retirement pension plan, and this is not their individual salary. This is an average salary for all of the custodians across the city, and it's not just the cost of their salaries, but all of the costs that are incurred for that category of worker. So when you see these numbers that look, you know, fairly exorbitant, teachers aren't making $93,000. That is what the average salary is for the average teacher with their salary, their benefits, their pension, and all the additional costs for that individual. They went, when they went to the school-based budgeting, they went to an average salary so that they would dissuade principals from going and cutting their more veteran, higher-priced staff in exchange for getting some newer, cheaper teachers, right? You know, in that sense, this is something that was worked out in the contract with the union to make sure that all teachers, you know, were kind of at an equal space, and we weren't going through and just cutting some of our veteran staff and replacing them with much cheaper rookie teachers. So same thing for all of these cost categories. So our custodians, I will be totally honest, the custodial service is something that we kind of scrimp on. I mean, I wish I could have, it's an 86,000 square foot building, and really we should have 4 custodians there. You know, and it's not something that I'm happy or proud of, right? But what I go through and rationalize is like, God, I could put in 4 custodians, but that means that's gonna cost me 2 reading specialists. And you know, really, I need my school to have a modicum of cleanliness, but our kids are not eating off the floor, right? So if my school is clean enough where if I walk down the hall or someone walks down the hall, they feel, it looks pretty good, right? They're not going through and, you know, dusting the back of here, right? You know, but that is a choice that we have made. And it's not an easy choice because clearly I get a lot of complaints from parents about, I went to the bathroom and there was no soap in the dispenser, right? It's a reality when you have 2 custodians, but we've gone through and made that strategic choice that we're going to kind of scrimp on our custodial workers in order to put more money into the classrooms with people that are working directly with kids. I would say the same thing around our office staff, right? This has been kind of a mainstay of Liberty. We have really, really tried to go bare bones, very lean on our administrative apparatus, because I'm a strong believer that, like, you know, we need more people working directly with kids. So if you look at our office staff, I have a secretary, and Miss Oliver is our paraeducator. She does really everything that the secretary doesn't do throughout the building. So between the attendance, the ordering, works the lunch duty, goes and helps with the dismissals, all sorts of stuff. Between those two and myself, we're kind of the core of the, the administrative staff. And we have gone through and made that choice to, not have a dean or a coach or an assistant principal or all these additional administrators, because we want to push a lot more of the resources into the classroom. You can see there's a position here that says locked. A locked position is something that is paid for centrally by North Avenue. So they would go through and they would identify certain positions as locked. Principal is one of the locked positions. Every school has to have a principal. They need to have somebody who is accountable, right? They need to have somebody who, if something goes wrong, this is their point of contact, this is the person they're going to. Same thing with like, a speech pathologist, right? So a speech pathologist would be a locked position. If you have students at your school that their IEP mandates that they need speech services, that is a locked position. So, yeah. Let's go to and you can see I've tried to do the numbers and do the percentages. So of our budget, 4.3% on office spending, that's this staff, 3.5% on custodial staff is how we break it down at Liberty. So you can go through and actually run these percentages at your school and start doing the comparisons. Like I said, this isn't ideal in those two categories. We are very, very slim on those two on the front page because we're more vast in these areas. So here are our teachers. $96,000 is the average salary for teachers this year. That is what they have deemed. When I came in 8 years ago, I think this was $73,000 per teacher. So really what has happened is, as each year has passed, what's made it harder for myself and my principal colleagues is really the funding has remained pretty flat, and the costs have gone up, at that rate about, more than 28%, 25%, 20%, which makes it really, really tough, right? Because each year you just have less dollars to work with in terms of funding all that different aspects of your program. This is one area, though, where where principals can play around a little bit, right? Because you can see I have the projected class sizes here. This is based on our enrollment last year, and I'm aging all the kids up, and I'm saying generally in third grade we get a couple kids transferring in. So this is what I'm projecting as my class sizes next year. I don't know if these are going to be totally accurate. They could be way off, but generally they're pretty close. But we've gone through, and you can see in the younger grades we're about 23, 25, and some of the older grades, we have a pretty large cohort of third grade kids, and then fourth graders we're at about 20, 21. There are some principals though that feel pretty strongly that I got good teachers, I got good classroom managers, I can push 30, 32 kids per class, right? And if you go that route, rather than having I have 3 teachers at each of these grade levels, I could really cut a fourth grade teacher and then move my classes to about 30, right? And then that's now $96,000 that I'm not spending in terms of instructional staff. I now have, though, larger class sizes in fourth grade. So, those are choices that can be made at the school level by the principal in conjunction with the community. We've gone through, and for the most part, we have 3 teachers at each grade level. And overall, we're budgeted for 437 kids, and our teachers represent 52% of our total budget. Okay, go to the next one. So those are our classroom teachers. We also have to have resource teachers, right? Because we have to have subjects like art and library and phys ed. This is where I wish I could have music. I wish I could have foreign language. But based on a school our size, we have to go through and make some choices. So these are the things that are mandated by state law. You have to have at least a half-time visual arts or music teacher. You have to have at least a half-time librarian. You have to have at least a half-time phys ed teacher. Since I have to have a half-time of all those, I need full-time of all those so that all of my teachers can get planning periods, at least 3 days a week, and then 1 day of collaborative planning. So those are the 3 resource choices that we have made. Our resource teachers account for 9% of the budget. Our special ed team, this would be our clinicians, right? So our IEP chair. You can see our psychologist is locked. I should have probably included like our speech pathologist, our occupational therapist. We have a physical therapist. Those are all locked positions. The OT and the PT, they're really just there like for one day a week or 1 day every 2 weeks. So while those are locked positions, they're not a large cost for each school. You can see we have decided to contribute for our social worker because right now our social worker is a 0.7 social worker. Based on the amount of students in our school and based on the IEPs of kids, Ms. Miller is assigned to Liberty 3.5 days. Ms. Miller is great though, and she's fantastic with the kids, and she adds a lot to the social emotional learning of our kids. So we have gone through and we've budgeted for 1.5 days, which ends up being $34,000 to bring Ms. Miller on 0.3 time. So, that's our clinicians, 3.1% of our total budget, and then you can see our special educators, 15% of our budget is in our special educators. We have 2 self-contained special education classes, and we have, in terms of resource teachers, we have really 3 full-time resource teachers. We have 2 full-time and 2 half-time. Yeah, that's a good question. So a self-contained special needs class would be students who more or less are, the hours mandate that they need generally about 5.5 hours of special ed services. So outside of the time that those kids are in library, art, or phys ed, or technology, or eating lunch, they're gonna be in a class with their similar peers with a special educator all day. So these are the kids that require the highest level of service, and really they need about 5-6 hours of special ed services a day. A special ed resource teacher would be for kids that need a much diluted level of special ed services. So they might need 1 hour of pull-out a day because they just need help working with phonics, or they just need help working with math calculations. So Ms. Rathgaber has her caseload of 25 kids that she pulls into her resource room for an hour a day, and then after she brings those kids back and then pulls another group of kids for an hour a day. So all of those resource teachers have 25 kids on their caseload that they're pulling for very, very targeted strategic portions of service, as opposed to being in a special education classroom throughout the totality of the day. Let's go to the next slide, and I think we're almost there. Okay, so if you look overall, our total budget is $3.23 million. $2.8 million is spent on personnel. So all the stuff that we just went through, that accounts for really 88% of the total budget. So, and we're in a school where those costs are actually pretty lean, right? Like the idea that we have 12% as non-personnel, that's a testament to the fact that we don't have a large administrative staff, that we really, cut in terms of custodians, because, we wanted to use the non-personnel money in order to focus some spending on things that we thought our kids needed. But, really when you talk about all the dollars that are tied up in schools, generally 90 to 95% are in staffing and in personnel, and the personnel costs are very high. So, yeah. Our per pupil allocation is about $7,000, $7,400 per kid. So when you take our allocation, you subtract out the personnel costs, we have about $400,000 in what's called OTPS, and that stands for other than personnel spending. 12% of our spending is categorized as non-personnel spending, and go to the next slide. And you can see it's a little bit better on the sheet that you have, but you can see where we have gone through and allocated our other than personnel spending. So this would pretty much be everything else that it takes to fund a school outside of staff and outside of things that are provided by the district. So things that would be provided by the district would be like maintenance and utilities on the facility, legal services, debt services, any communications and media stuff that they are doing, transportation, non-public placements. But everything else that you would think of in terms of supporting spending within a school, that would all come out of this $400,000 pot. So that would be substitutes, that would be supplies, our custodial supplies, our mops, our brooms, our vacuums, toilet paper, paper towels, our instructional supplies. This would be copy paper. This would be all the instructional materials, markers, crayons, art supplies. This would be our technology. This would be our technology, computers, boards, all of that stuff, and then all of our contracts. So we have quite a bit of our money in contracts because we partner with organizations in order to provide services to our kids that we feel like they would benefit from. So we talked about Holistic Life so that they can provide the kind of meditation and mindfulness and support for kids in terms of like behavior and climate. Code in the Schools provides computer coding and technology programming for our kids. Reading Partners provides one-on-one tutoring for students in reading. And yeah, you can see some of our other partners that we've had, we've utilized before, we are not paying for now. We have a lot of money in field trips. We have the largest field trip program in Baltimore. So last year we took our kids on 93 field trips. And that's where we've gone through and allocated a good portion of our funds, right? So, yeah. And then the largest portion of this would be, you can see this large amount, $160,000 in classroom interventionists. These are a function of what I said, the personalized learning program. So these are 9 additional staff members that we have hired to work in small groups or one-on-one with kids. So we hire folks from the community. We hire people who are just, have a history working with kids. We go through, we background check them, and we pay them in order to work with our kids in small groups and individually to do some very, very targeted support. So, I would love that those 10 people are all certified teachers, but clearly I cannot afford that. So we try to find really, really good people that we can pay to fill into that position, and we spend $160,000 on that. So because of that, we have 10 additional staff members that are working with kids on a daily basis that a lot of schools don't have. Yeah. And I think there's, when we do the school budgeting forums, this is usually where I get the bulk of my input from parents on, because these are the funds that are a lot more fungible, right? Like, they're not beholden to union contracts or going and having to cut staff members, having to go through and make big staffing changes. And there's a lot that we can provide in terms of input just dealing with this $400,000 portion of the budget. That's where we usually get a lot of our input from. I think the last slide is just oh yeah, any questions? All right.
Let's think.
Oh.
And we'll bring
Yeah.
both of you guys up together.
Okay.
for questions.
Good.